I'm Sarah Seidner in Minneapolis.
In Atlanta, Georgia.
Buffalo, New York.
Omar Jimenez in Houston.
Louisville, Kentucky.
Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Seattle. In the city of Philadelphia.
And this
is CNN.
There's little love lost between Iran and the United States.
Well, it is now Washington's move after Iran retaliated.
Relations between the two countries have been troubled for more than half a century. But where did the conflict start? To understand that, we need to go back to the 1950s and this man, Mohammad Mossadegh. Mossadegh, who became prime minister in 1951, was key in nationalizing the country's British-controlled oil fields.
British experts were granted a concession to...
As a result, the British enlisted the US to get rid of him. In 1953, the CIA and MI6 backed a coup ousting Mossadegh, restoring instead Iran's monarch, the Shah. But the Shah became unpopular at home for his lavish spending, ostentatious lifestyle, and the torture of dissidents. That all changed in 1979. The Islamic Revolution ushered in change, forcing the Shah to flee the country. The high-ranking Shia religious leader Ayatollah Khomeini returned from exile in February to become Iran's supreme leader. Later that year, amid death to America chants, Iranian students stormed the US embassy in Tehran, taking 90 people hostage, including 66 Americans. Ultimately, all the hostages were released in a siege lasting 444 days. But the damage was done. The US designated Iran a state sponsor of terrorism 3 years later. In the 1980s, Iran and Iraq became embroiled in a war. The US was officially neutral, but in a bid to contain Iran, started backing Iraq and its leader Saddam Hussein. The move put the US and Iran even further at odds. The tension ratcheted up toward the end of the Iran-Iraq War. In 1988, the US shot down an Iranian passenger plane over Iranian territorial waters when it mistakenly identified it as a fighter jet. It killed all 290 people on board. When Iraq invaded Kuwait in 1990, the US and Iran suddenly shared Saddam Hussein as a common enemy. Although it did little to improve relations, US sanctions against Iran accelerated under the Clinton administration. In 2002, a year before the start of the Iraq War, President Bush included Iran in what he called the axis of evil.
States like these and their terrorist allies constitute an axis of evil.
Due to concerns Tehran was trying to develop nuclear weapons to threaten the US. The Iraq War resulted in years of violence, leaving a fractured state and some argue a power vacuum that led to the rise of ISIS. The terror group became a common enemy for two longtime rivals. Iran-backed militias and US troops both battled ISIS in Iraq and Syria. In 2015, hopes for a thaw in relations between Iran and the US grew. The two countries, alongside European nations, signed a nuclear deal that granted limited sanction relief to Iran in exchange for limits on nuclear activities. But after US President Donald Trump pulled out of the nuclear agreement,
that we cannot and will not make this certification,
and ISIS forces were pushed back in Iraq and Syria, tensions started rising again. The killing of Qasem Soleimani at the start of 2020 was a dramatic escalation and puts the relationship in uncharted waters.